Tonight's Health Center in November is National Stomach Cancer Awareness Month. The American Cancer Society says about 27,000 Americans will be diagnosed with stomach cancer this year. About 16,000 of those cases will be men, about 10,000 will be women, and stomach cancer mostly affects older people in their 60s. And earlier I spoke with Steve Mellon. He's a 12-year survivor and author who talks about his battle with stomach cancer. Steve Mellon, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, we know that you've lived over 12 years without a stomach. So can you talk about how you had to adjust your life initially after surgery and then what life is like 12 years later?
Initially, well, thank you for having me. Initially, it was extremely difficult because, you have to adjust to the new plumbing that you have. And the new plumbing is basically bypassing, it's going straight down your throat into your small intestine. And they also took out my spleen and half my pancreas and a third of my esophagus in that initial surgery almost 13 years ago. So the transition from being in that state to being where I am right now it takes a couple years to actually get used to it. But I was, you have to eat small quantities. You have to adjust to the plumbing, and I went through chemo and radiation following that. So it was really hard.
Oh, I mean, I can't even imagine that. And really, Steve, we don't hear much about stomach cancer. Can you talk to us about some of the risk factors for it, maybe what people should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I had no idea. I was completely blind to this before. I was 37 years old at the time. I had a pain in my lower esophagus and upper stomach, and they diagnosed me initially as just having stress because I had a new 1-year-old daughter. I had a new job that I had switched over after about 15 years, and I had a remodel going on in my house. Everything was sort of upside down. And they thought I had stress and anxiety from all the activity that was going on. So that little pain after being checked 2 and 3 times by my primary care physician ended up was the initial signs of the cancer. And so it took me about 6 months to finally get into the emergency room and find out that I was anemic, I had a mass growing, and that mass turned into 2 weeks later. They said, we need to do something rapidly. So I had my stomach removed 2 weeks later.
Oh my gosh. Well, Steve, hearing that, it's so scary. So essentially you were misdiagnosed, or it was just missed for 6 months. How advanced had the cancer become?
It turned into stage 3B cancer, which the survival rate at 3B is not so good. It's about a 12% chance of survival after 5 years. So I didn't know these odds beforehand, so it's easy for me to say and smile now, but I guess back then it was really difficult. I was sedated and on a breathing tube for a week, and because I sprung a leak at the connection. So the whole procedure was a lot worse than I anticipated, but if we would have diagnosed it earlier, I probably would have had a smoother transition. But the result is 12 years later, I'm happy, I'm skinny, I can't gain weight, and I'm doing really well now. But the initial transformation and going through all that was very, very difficult.
Well, Steve, we only have about a minute left, but I know you've written a book, a memoir called Killer Graces. Kind of talk to us about what inspired you to write that.
I wanted to get the story out there. I've been tired of hearing negative, bad stories and unhappy endings. So I wanted to share a happy ending. Now, it gets pretty wild and crazy in the middle there, but the result is that, I made it through the addiction from the pain meds. I made it through rehabs. I made it through everything. And 13 years later, I'm here enjoying my life to the fullest. And I want to share that story because people have a lot of hard things that they're going through. And I think it's just a positive, happy ending.
Oh, absolutely. And Steve, last question for you. Someone else is going to get this diagnosis that you've had, that you've been through. What would your advice be to that person?
I would highly suggest using all the resources online. I am a mentor and a board member of Debbie's Dream Foundation. That is a great resource to go and then find out which match you up with different people, mentors, and find out what you need to do the next steps. That's probably the thing that I didn't have when I first got diagnosed.
Great advice. Steve Mellon, stomach cancer survivor, author of Killer Graces. We thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me.